Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today, I'm going to go ahead and follow up the installation of the LokSound decoder with the video that you guys asked for, how to program the LokSound decoder. So we're going to take it two different ways. First, I'll show you how you go about using the LokProgrammer software and the LokProgrammer hardware to upload a sound file to the decoder in a locomotive, and then do some basic programming of the CVs, or configuration variables. And then I'll show you how you can export those CV settings to a file that you can then read into DecoderPro and just transfer the settings from the sound package that came from LokSound into DecoderPro. One thing I do want to mention, though, before we do jump into that, is that there are actually two different forms of LokSound decoders now in version 5. There's the European version, and then there is the North American and Australian version. And the main difference is that the European version of the decoders support other formats of command control, whereas the North American and Australian version is just focused on DCC. And when you look up a decoder in DecoderPro, it will have DCC in the name of that decoder. And the same thing goes when you go to the LokSound website. They will have different areas for the European sound files and the North American and Australian sound files. And I'll show you that when we look at the website. So let's go ahead and get started now. Okay, before we get started, I want to ask you to take a second to subscribe. Click on the subscribe box, and when that comes up, click on the little bell right next to it and click all. Okay, so this is the ESU website where you can download sound packages and the software. So let me show you. If you go to downloads right here, click on that. You have an option of sounds, software, and instruction manuals. So let's go ahead, click on software, and you can click right through here and download the LokProgrammer software. It is only available for Windows computers, so be aware of that. Let's go back and take a look at instruction manuals. So here you can go through and get the manual for the LokProgrammer. So for more intensive work with the LokProgrammer, I suggest you download this file and take a look at it. Also, as I said in the opening, there is the LokSound ESU help group on the www.groups.io platform. Now let's take a look at sounds, because that's the important thing here. And we're going to go with LokSound 5. And you can see we have the European sound files and their factory-equipped versions, and the North American and Australian sound files, and some of those that are available in factory-equipped locos. Now let me go ahead and click on this one, and I'll show you. You can go with diesels is what we're looking for, and let's go to the United States, and we'll go on down here, and I need to skip to the next page because I know it's at the bottom of page 2. And here is the sound file that I will be working with. So you could just click right here on the download, and you can download that file. Now, you'll notice right over here is the number, S0761. So that's the number that you would tell your LokSound dealer that you want uploaded into the decoder that you're purchasing from them. Or if you're getting an NW2 or something like that, or an SW7, it would be a S0762. So that's how you find out the number that you tell the LokSound dealer when you want to purchase one of those decoders. Now I can tell you that the LokProgrammer hardware device, the interface for your computer, it sells, you can get it somewhere between $125 and $150. So for a lot of people who are just going to be incidental users or purchasers of LokSound decoders, that may be more than they're willing to put into it. If you're going to equip your entire fleet of locomotives with LokSound decoders, or a sizable proportion of them, you might want to actually purchase one of these, because they do make it a lot faster and easier to program LokSound decoders. Also, that's the only way that you can upload a sound file to a LokSound decoder. So I'm going to show you how to go ahead and upload the sound project. I'll show you how to do some of the edits in here. The edits that you can do with a LokProgrammer and LokSound decoder are just far too extensive for me to go into. And also, I don't use my LokProgrammer for anything other than basic uploading of the sound packages and minor amounts of CV programming. The rest of it I do in DecoderPro. So what I'm also going to show you how to do today then is how you can take the LokProgrammer program shown right here, download a file from the internet, from the LokSound website, make some modifications to it, the CVs in particular, and then go ahead and save that information to a file that you can then load into DecoderPro, so that you will have all of the CV settings in DecoderPro that you need for that particular decoder. And that's really the safest way to get those CV values into DecoderPro, because you do not want to try to do a read using DecoderPro of any LokSound decoder, because there are far too many CVs to read in, and you're just going to end up with tons of errors. Whereas if you do it this way, save the data from the LokProgrammer itself, then you get all of those changes that have been made, the editing changes you've done, and you can just copy them into DecoderPro and use them there. Now, one thing I do want to tell you before we start with any of this. Before you purchase a LokSound decoder, be aware that they do not come with sounds already saved on them. They do have a generic diesel of some kind that they put on there. I suppose it's used for quality control checks at the factory to make sure it works, but it's not something you're going to want to use. In order to get a sound package on that decoder, you either have to have LokProgrammer and the LokProgrammer hardware to do it yourself, or you've got to find a dealer who will do it for you. So that's the first thing you need to ask a dealer before you even think about buying a decoder from him, is whether or not he can upload files for you, and whether or not he does it for free, because there are a lot of dealers who do it for free as long as you're buying that decoder from them. So make sure you ask first. I know that Brian Bianco at Streamline Backshop, that is SBS, the numeral 4, DCC.com, he will do this for you. You can go to the LokSound website and just look up LokSound USA. And when it comes up, they have a menu item at the top that says Downloads. And when you open Downloads, click on that and it opens, and then you can select Sounds. And then under the Sounds, you get to select the version. So you want version 5 is the current version of decoders. So you can go there, you can download the sound packages. Let's assume then that you've got your decoder, it's been programmed, or the sound files have been uploaded by the dealer that you bought the decoder from. You've installed it in your locomotive, and you're ready to start customizing it for your use, because it does come with default settings already. And those are the CV settings that you want to modify in some cases. So once you download that sound file and store it somewhere on your computer, start the program, and this is what it comes up. And it'll ask you, what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to open an existing decoder project. That is one that I have just downloaded. So I'm going to open it, and it's going to bring up this typical window here. And I've got my files. I've got version 5 ones here, you can see. And we'll click on that. And I'm going to go down here to the one S0761, and that's the EMD Dual 567B. And that's the one that we used, or I used, in that E8 unit. Okay, so I'm going to click that and click on Open. And what it's going to do is that will read in all of the CVs for that particular decoder and that sound package. And then you can start modifying it. Like for the first thing, here, use the long address. You're probably going to want to do that. And in my case, it's 2924. You can make other changes here. You can go ahead and enable a consist address at this time if you want. You can specify which functions will be activated in a consist mode. But most of the things that you're going to want to do is just change right here the address and specify using the long address. And then you can start moving on down for other things like driving characteristics. And that is things like the acceleration rate and the deceleration rate, CVs 3 and 4. You can do some other things like adjust forward and reverse trimming. And that's a special feature that you can use to to customize the locomotive so that it will go the same speed forward and reverse. And there's some other things down here, but I rarely use much more than the acceleration and the deceleration settings. Let's go ahead and take a look at functions, because those are some of the things that you're going to want to change, or I did anyway. Because you remember that I wanted to use a Mars light instead of a ditch light. Now in my case, in that video, I initially was going to use A6 for my Mars light connection. As it turned out, A6 and A10 on that particular Decoder Buddy board was dedicated for the white wire on the 3-wire power pack Stay Alives that comes from LokSound. So I had to actually move that, and I moved it to AUX1 or A1 on the other side of that Decoder Buddy. And so that's the one that I decided to use. Now I'm going to want to change that because it's not a ditch light, it's a Mars light. So I click on that to activate it, and I go down here and I select Mars light right here. And that turns it into a Mars light. And then I'm going to change the label to Mars light. And that's done. Now, let's go to function mapping. And this is where you assign certain functions to certain wires or physical or logical outputs. So right down here, you can see we've got forward F0, that's the forward headlight, and that would be your white wire. And you could go in and you could change that if you wanted to. I don't want to. F0 here, reverse, that would be your yellow wire. Okay, so your physical outputs might be wired outputs. In this case, I'm showing you here. You can go on down here to F6. And you note that F6 right now is set for my Mars light. Okay. I only want A1 though. I don't want A2. A2 was the other alternate ditch light because you got 2 ditch lights. So those would work in concert. So I've just activated the Mars light alone for F6. So that means once I reprogram this decoder, if I hit F6 on my throttle, then the Mars light is going to start flashing. But next thing we need to worry about is the flash rate. So let's go ahead and look at function outputs. We need to move on to settings. Right here, frequency for blinking effects of the physical outputs. Now, this is what controls the flashing rate of a Mars light. So I have found that, in this case, a value of 10, if I remember, is what I liked once I finished playing with this. So there, I've reset the ditch light to a Mars light. I've assigned the Mars light to function 6 on my throttle. I have changed the frequency for the flash rate of the Mars light itself. Now, what else might we want to change down here? I need to change my, my horn, because I think it comes with like a black type Leslie horn. So let's look at that. So if you look here on the left, there is a information section, and that tells you all kinds of things about this decoder sound package. And you can see here, this is an E7 locomotive image. And if you go on down through here, it tells you some of the history of it, and it tells you that it was used in locomotives E3 through E9, and that it was recorded from an E8A locomotive, which is great. That's the locomotive that I programmed. And then you can read on down through the rest of this stuff. What I'm interested in is the sounds. So there's about 15, I guess, 15 different horns available here. And the one I'm interested in is the Nathan M5 down here. Now a Nathan M5 is what the Southern Railway used on just about all of their cab units, including all of the E units. So I'm going to change CV163 to a value of 8. So in order to do that, I need to go over here again and go back to where we're doing our decoder work. And let's read and write a CV. That's easier. So it was CV163, and I needed to change that to a value of 8. And that's going to give me the horn that I want. What I want to do then is, we've done all of the changes that I wanted to make here. I haven't made any changes to the sounds. So as you can see, you can just go right through here and make all kinds of changes to the sounds. I prefer to do that kind of stuff once I get into DecoderPro. So that's pretty much everything that I want to show you now. At this point, you could go up here and you have several different options. This one would allow you to read the decoder data that is already in the locomotive. This particular one here writes decoder data to the locomotive. That one is just the CV settings. This one here allows you to write the sound data. So you have the option here of writing decoder data and overwriting defaults as well as the sound. And they tell you it can take up to 30 minutes, and it does. And then you just click next, and it would start doing it. It's telling me that it's not finding anything because I need to change my COM port settings. I can see why. I don't have it plugged in. But at any rate, it would go ahead and start sending the sound file up to the decoder and all of those CV changes that we made. Now, at that point, you could just walk away and come back in 25, 30 minutes, and it should be done. And you will have saved all of that stuff to your decoder. Another good thing that you might want to do is save that specific sound package. And what I would prefer to do then is click File and Save As. And we can save that as a different name. So let's save that as I'm going to call Test EMD. And that will save all of the modifications that I've made to the file and allow me to keep the original file that I downloaded from LokSound, from the LokSound website, just the way it was. So I click Save, and it's going to save it that way. Now, at this point, I'm going to show you how you can take all of these CV settings that are in LokProgrammer and move them to DecoderPro. Because when you go into DecoderPro, there's no way to get them. You're just going to have the generic DecoderPro information for a LokSound 5 decoder. So in order to get these specific CV settings as they come in this file into DecoderPro, you have to do this. Go up here to Tools and click Tools, and see here it says Export CV List. Click that. And I'm going to say we're going to do the Test EMD, and it's going to save it. And what that's going to do is it's going to save all of the CV settings for the decoder to that particular file in a text file format. And then we can open up DecoderPro and read it in and do the programming over there too. So I'm going to go ahead and close this program and open up DecoderPro. I've opened DecoderPro now, and the first thing we're going to want to do once we open up DecoderPro is create a new loco entry in the roster for that locomotive. So let's go ahead and do that. We have to select the decoder, and it is a ESU LokSound version 5. So we look for nope, not LokPilot, LokSound version 5, and we want a 5 DCC. So we're going to open up the Comprehensive Programmer. Okay, let me get that centered here. Okay, let's go ahead and give it a name. We're going to call this Southern Railway E8. And we'll save that to the roster. And it says it's saved okay here. And now we can move on and start doing other things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to read in all of those CV settings that we just saved. So I'm going to go up here to File, go to Import, and it says LokProgrammer CV file. So I'm going to do that, hit that. There it is. And we'll go to version 5, and I believe it was test EMD text, yes. So let's open that CV file, and it's reading it in right now, importing the list file. You can see it says it right here at the bottom. Finally, it says OK. Now, if you then look, it's already set for 2924. DC conversion is enabled. I don't want that. I'm going to change that real quick. Everything else is set up correct. The motor settings, acceleration and deceleration are in there. The speed control, remember the midpoint was 88, so that's still there. We've got everything in place. Let's look at the function map. You'll notice now that F6 is set for AUX1. And you remember AUX1 we set to be the Mars light. Let's see what else. Function outputs. And one of the things here, let's go down to F6 or AUX1. And you can see AUX1 is set for a Mars light. We want to turn that grade crossing off. Must have forgotten to do that, but it's still set for LED mode. So we're in good shape on that end of things. So as you can see, it's already brought all of this stuff in here for us. The rate for the blinking lights, set at 10. So everything that we need to make changes in for programming-wise is already here. And you could go and refine this, fine-tune this even more now working with your DecoderPro program and your interface, either your LocoNet interface or your Sprog or whatever interface for your computer system. And you can go ahead and make those changes. Let's look at some of the sound levels here, because that's one thing that can be confusing. Because you'll see everything is identified as a sound slot. Now you've got your master volume, that's straightforward up there. But down here, this is where, if you look in the LokProgrammer program, all of the sound slots were identified there, but they're not identified here. So you almost have to make a list of the sound slot numbers that are available in LokProgrammer for that file, and so you'll know what to change over here. Now I know that sound slot 1 is usually reserved for the prime mover. They've tried to more or less standardize these things now, but it still requires a list at some point to know what's what. So in this particular pane, you can modify the various sound levels, customize those to what you like, and the same with the lights functions. On the outputs here, you can make all kinds of changes. Here, you can change these to any kind of light you want. For example, here, you might want to be able to play with Rule 17, dimming forward and reverse. And that's, or with dimming, whatever. So these are the kind of things that you can do in DecoderPro. The rest of this is all just regular DecoderPro programming changes. So, hopefully if you have DecoderPro, you're at least aware of those kind of changes and may have some expertise. The main thing, though, are these sound slot settings. Now, one way to find the sound slots, or some of them, is if you go here to the function map, you can see that F1, which in most cases would be your bell, is associated with sound slot 4. And F2, which is your horn, is sound slot 3. So there are a few of these here that you can go to. Now, F8, that's your prime mover, that's sound slot 1. So you can get some of these sound slot identifications by just looking through the list here under the function map. Once you've done all that, then it's simply a matter of, on each page, writing changes on the sheet. I hope that gives you some guidance as to how you can use either the LokProgrammer with the LokProgrammer hardware interface, or LokProgrammer to create the CV changes, the changes to the CVs that you want in order to customize the file, and get those configuration variables adapted for your specific likes and dislikes, and then save those changes as a text file, import them into DecoderPro, as I showed you here, and write them out to the decoder. It's just like using DecoderPro as you would with a Soundtrax or a Digitrax or any other type of decoder. So it's fairly straightforward in that respect. Now, once, of course, that you're finished with doing all of this stuff, you're going to want to save. And that saves everything to your computer files. Well, that's a wrap for today's video on how to program LokSound decoders. Now, I didn't get into a lot of the really deep details with doing this because it gets very complicated very quickly. So the best thing you can do is download the LokProgrammer program and start fooling around with it. Also remember that there is a very good LokSound forum on www.groups.io. And anytime you have any really specific questions about using LokProgrammer or LokSound decoders or anything like that, that is really a great place to go. A lot of people that have been working with LokSound decoders for a long time are available there on that forum, and I recommend it highly. And also remember too that all the manufacturers that I know of are represented with forums, help forums on groups.io. So have a good week, and we'll see you here on Friday with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.